Hey everybody, Asher here with news from Hearthstone, specifically card nerfs in the basic and standard set. We knew they were coming for a long time, and like many announcements of changes, people are going to be happy or upset or at least craving their dust. So let's try and at least get an initial reaction. Keep in mind this video has been made before Whispers of the Old Gods has come out, or even before the whole set's been revealed, so it's going to be a little difficult to talk about these cards in respect to the standard and wild formats in the future, but we can at least talk about the changes as they affect the game right now and possibly going forward. So let's begin. First up is a change to Ancient of Lore, specifically same mana cost, but now it's either draw 1 card or restore 5 health. I would say at this point that this card's probably a little overcosted now. Azure Drake gives you a few less stats for 2 less mana, but you get spell power. So I'm not sure if Ancient of Lore is necessarily going to see play. The 5 heal can still be good, but I'm not 100% sure 5 healing is worth 2 mana and a body. Depends on how aggro of a meta it is, but this is a significant nerf. I do think the 2 card draw to 1 card draw is justified, but it's going to remain to be seen. Are there other cards that are going to take that sweet 7-drop space that's already pretty crowded as is for Druid? Next, everyone can rejoice because the Force War combo, as we know it, is dead. Instead, this gets the Ball of Spiders treatment to a point. Force of Nature is now 5 mana, and it summons 3 2/2 treants. These treants no longer have charge. Charge being a mechanic that has been troubling a lot of game developers, not just Blizzard, but Blizzard has certainly learned some of the challenges of dealing with and balancing charge mechanics. So now you can play this on 5 and get 3 2/2s. Is that good enough for 5 mana in a token Druid deck or something like that? Hard to say. Hard to say. But we'll see if there's some other decks that play around with this. I'm not sure if this is going to be more than 800 deaths for people who had the combo pieces previously. But Keeper of the Grove. Now here is the first huge nerf bat of everything that we've seen that was maybe a little bit unexpected. Keeper of the Grove has been an automatic play. It's a great anti-aggro card, both because of the 2 damage and the 2/4 body. It's a bit of a Swiss Army knife of a card, and Blizzard felt that it went a little bit too far because now it's a 2/2 body. So deal 2 damage or silence a minion. So it's either like a SI agent or it's a worse spellbreaker or a worse owl, as we'll get to it, that costs a lot more. So this is a pretty significant nerf. It still does have some utility, but I'm not sure what the worth is of paying 4 mana for a 2/2. I think Keeper of the Grove is going to see its way out of play pretty hard. Speaking of silences, next is Ironbeak Owl, which is only one slight change, 2 to 3. Now, I was curious for a little bit if they were going to try and just get rid of the silence mechanics in Hearthstone, or at least in Standard, especially with some of the big body, big, interesting, fun cards that have been revealed or announced in Whispers of the Old Gods. But I do think that 2 mana to 3 mana is a pretty interesting change. It's enough where you'll still see Ironbeak Owl in play, but now I guess the question becomes, would you rather pay 4 mana for a 4/3 spellbreaker? And I think the answer for a lot of people might actually be yes. So Ironbeak Owl, of an interesting response. I think it is correct to value the mana cost for a silence mechanic like that. But ooh, that is going to change some things. At least some classes will still enjoy the beast synergy with this card, so that's a reason to choose it. But big change. It's not going to put Ironbeak Owl out of play, though. At least. Next up on the big change list is Big Game Hunter. One of the cards where I'm not 100% sure if this was nerfed enough. This feels a lot like the Sylvanas nerf in the past, moving it from 5 to 6 mana, where people said, because Sylvanas has a very strong effect that's very hard to replicate, same as Big Game Hunter, has a very strong effect, very hard to replicate. The big issue with Big Game Hunter, though, is not just that it's removal for pretty much a free 4/2 minion. Now it's the same kind of removal you pay 2 or 3 or 4 mana for other classes, and you still get a minion. So Big Game Hunter is still going to have the beast in his sights. He's just not going to be able to follow it up with some other huge drop as well. So I'm not sure if this one went far enough necessarily, but it is definitely a change for the better, a more expensive Big Game Hunter. It'll see how things shake up, but as excited as I was about my Big Game Hunter dust, I don't think I'm necessarily going to get all that I thought I might have. Next on the nerf menu is Hunter's Mark, which very interestingly got the Soulfire treatment. going from 0 mana to 1 mana. Otherwise, the same effect. Blizzard essentially saying that 0 cost spells are a little bit too effective, or that lock and load decks are not going to be a thing, so we don't need a 0 cost cantrip like this. Hunter's Mark is still very good, and if Control Hunter ever becomes a thing, it's still going to be good. And you know what? In a way, 1 mana for practically a silence effect, assuming you have something on the board, is still not bad. So the decks that played Hunter's Mark before will probably still play them, but there may be some other cards that fit in just a little bit better. And finally, for the class cards, we have Blade Flurry, by far the biggest change that's probably sparked the most outcry. And after facing a few Malagos rogues on ladder, I don't exactly say I'm going to miss it, but it does make me a little bit sad to a point. Both a mana increase cost and an effect change where the weapon deals damage to minions, not all enemies, minions. So you're not going to be able to stab face Blade Flurry for double damage anymore. Blizzard says this is a design space issue, and I can see that to a point. The problem is that while you still have deadly poison, you don't have oil in standard anymore. So at least what this change tells me is that, contrary to what other people believe, is that Blizzard is still concerned about wild as well as standard as a format, because this is a change that is going to significantly affect wild. So you can get your tiers on, tiers out for those of you that are still playing Rogue. This is a huge nerf. This is the starving buzzard of the nerfs, if you will. But I will say it kind of turns it into a Shadow Flame, except instead of sacrificing a minion, you sacrifice a weapon. So it's something. Next on the nerf list is Knife Juggler, and I think this is a interesting change to a point. A lot of people have been begging for Knife Juggler to get nerfed hard for a while, and I think most people's annoyance with Knife Juggler is not so much the 3/2 stat line as it is the 1 damage to a random enemy. So the change is that we have a 2/2 stat line, and we still have the exact same effect as before. Now, granted, Mustard for Battle is only going to be in wild format, and there are going to be some other ways that a lot of classes can create some kind of tokens or play a bunch of cheap minions. So Knife Juggler still fits the archetype of being able to go in a weenie deck, all right. What's interesting, I think a good counterpoint or comparison to this is Defender of Argus, which used to cost, it did cost more mana, but it used to have a much better stat line and would give +1/+1. They adjusted the base values on it, the attack and health, and it still is a card that sees play. So Knife Juggler is weaker, but it's still going to see play. So for those of you that were hoping Knife Juggler would be gone, it's not gone. And Leper Gnome changes are next, or should we say Thermos Sparkplug changes, because Leper Gnome got weaker on the tail end of it, specifically a reduction from 2 attack to 1 attack. So if you get 1 hit in essentially from the Leper Gnome, you're not kind of turning it into a fireball for 1 mana or something else if you can get it uncontested on the first turn. But it still does the death rattle of 2 damage. It just doesn't do as much damage there, so it's not going to be able to trade up in some aggro matchups. But once again, an aggro deck is going to value that to face damage pretty well. It's going to be interesting to see if this card makes the cut in standard versus some cards that have potentially not been revealed in Whispers of the Old Gods, because at least for the cards that we have out remaining right now, it's still a very solid 1-drop. And in case you liked aggro decks, here is another nerf to the aggro meta to a point, which is Arcane Golem no longer having charge. It does have more health, but it gives your opponent a mana crystal. Now, we've seen a few 3 for 4 cards with drawbacks out there. Ogre that attacks random people, Dancing Swords, those never saw play, and granted those are going to wild instead of standard now. But Arcane Golem is pretty much a dead card. 100 dust, don't pass go, don't collect $200, just completely go to your local dust button here. Because it is giving your opponent a mana crystal is way worse than giving them a card draw, is way worse than possibly hitting the wrong opponent or a wrong minion here. So Arcane Golem, officially, you can trash it. As for cards that could be a little bit more debatable whether you trash them or not, we have Molten Giants, which is, once again, this is interesting, kind of a nerf that affects wild pretty hard, where Echo of Medivh is still going to be there. Molten Giant's mana cost from 20 to 25. For those of you who are unfamiliar with how the card works, you have to reduce your health in order to get it to go, which means you get free Molten Giants now at 5 health instead of 10 health. Now, there are still ways to drop yourself down to 5 health, but it's going to be a lot harder, a lot riskier. But, I mean, there's been plenty of Reno plays where I've seen and where I've done myself where you can get yourself deep, deep, deep in the hole enough on that preliminate turn. That's not the word I'm looking for, but it's the word I'm going to use here. There's a lot of ways to get yourself down to 5 health. I think a lot of tiers over this Molten Giant nerf are crocodile tiers, and people are going to get over it. No, it's not as strong as maybe as it once was, but by the time it's relevant to get Molten Giants out, you can usually reduce its cost very, very significantly. And since Force Roar combo is no longer a thing, you can get to 5 health relatively more safely. And finally on the nerf train, the card that Blizzard has been saying for years that they want to nerf. They finally got around to it, Master of Disguise. Instead of giving a friendly minion stealth, they're giving a friendly minion stealth until your next turn. No one ever really played Master of Disguise anyway, not even in Arena, where you'd just be disappointed to see it. But giving like a Auctioneer permanent stealth or something like that, while a fun combo to a point, is still an unreliable combo. But as Blizzard says, increasing the ability to design cards because they're not necessarily stealth forever does help and is healthy for the game to a point. But this is not going to affect a lot of people unless you want a full refund on Dust, because you've been holding on to your Master of Disguises. If you have for the past few years, congratulations. So what do we learn about the nerfs? All we've pretty much learned is that Blizzard is wanting to dial down aggro to a point, and cards that act as a little bit too much of Swiss Army knives do a little bit too much, scaling back. There's not really a lot of surprises, except for maybe Blade Flurry. But, I mean, those are the changes, and this is only part of the picture. We'll know a lot more about what Standard is going to look like and what Wild is going to look like once we know the rest of the new cards that are being introduced in Whispers of the Old Gods. We should know that probably this time tomorrow. So that's it for now. We will continue this discussion a later day. This is Asher. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.